The dynamics had changed due to household responsibilities and aging. Hudson was particularly bothered by their age difference. When he was almost 30 and she was 20, it didn't seem as daunting as it did now. Hudson had grown into a mature man with gray hair, while Mary, at 30, still remained an attractive young woman with a mischievous light in her eyes. What are we going to after enduring betrayal from those closest to him? Hudson's perspective on the world drastically shifted. At the young age of 22, he faced betrayal from his fiancée, Mary, who abandoned him for her boyfriend just 3 months before their wedding. She took off with the engagement ring and all the savings meant for their future celebration, leaving Hudson feeling disillusioned and hesitant to trust others, especially women. This experience led him to become overly critical of potential partners, causing him to prematurely end relationships before they even had a chance to develop. As time went on, Hudson gave up on the idea of finding love and resigned himself to being a bachelor forever. However, just as he made peace with his decision, Mary entered his life again like a whirlwind. With her infectious laughter and a sprinkle of freckles on her radiant face, Mary and Hudson worked in the same office but on different floors, occasionally sharing lunch with colleagues. Despite warnings that Hudson was a stereotypical introverted programmer who drank too much coffee, Mary imagined someone completely different. A man with glasses, a grungy sweater, and messy hair. To her surprise, Hudson had curly brown hair and charming dimples on his cheeks. Mary was immediately smitten and didn't hold back from showing her interest. Their relationship progressed rapidly, catching Hudson off guard with how quickly he fell for Mary's charm. 3 years after they first met, the couple got married, and Hudson rediscovered his belief in the goodness of the world. 1 year later, Mary announced that she had been promoted, a news that filled Hudson, now an expectant father, with immense happiness. 10 years had passed since then, and Hudson and Mary's son was now attending school. However, an uncomfortable feeling had developed between husband and wife, as if one of them no longer belonged in the relationship. Despite this, both stubbornly pretended not to notice. It was a common occurrence when, after years of marriage, one suddenly realizes a loss of interest. The once fervent declarations of love, for better or worse, seemed distant, and they had become estranged from each other. Like strangers. "Oh, due for our anniversary?" His wife asked one morning during their usual breakfast routine before heading to work. Reluctantly, Hudson replied, "I haven't thought about it yet. Maybe we'll go to a restaurant." His midlife crisis was in full swing, causing him to have little desire to celebrate his birthday. Carson suggested that they throw him a surprise party. "We'll take care of everything. You just have to show up." Mary smiled. The party was still 6 months away, and Carson agreed to the suggestion. As the birthday approached, Mary stayed late at work, using the preparations as an excuse. She frequently exchanged text messages with someone on her phone. Remembering his previous failure in a serious relationship, Hudson couldn't help but wonder if Mary had someone else in her life but was keeping it a secret. Not wanting to offend his wife, he tried to push those thoughts away. But they only made him more upset. The incident with the runaway bride from his past seemed to create an invisible barrier, preventing him from fully trusting in the relationship. Mary herself didn't understand how it had happened. Carson had always been there for her, but she had never perceived him in a romantic way. Carson, an ordinary and unremarkable man, had never married in his 43 years, and constantly joked that he didn't know the exact number of his children scattered around the world. This became a running joke during their weekend gatherings, where they would all get together and indulge in alcohol. As they began to prepare for Hudson's birthday, Mary and Carson grew closer and began to see each other in a different light. Mary started to perceive her husband's friend as a more mature and respectable person. It turned out that he was well-read and intelligent. Sometimes their conversations about art and literature would linger so long that they forgot the reason for their meeting. The first time they bonded was during a car ride where they sipped takeout coffee and animatedly discussed award-nominated movies. Mary became so immersed in their connection that reality began to seem fictional to her. After these meetings with Carson, she would return home to her husband, and a wave of shame and disappointment would wash over her. She tried her best to make amends, but Hudson noticed the changes in her behavior. However, he didn't want to understand the reasons for them. Everything fell apart on Hudson's 40th birthday. He was having a surprise party with friends and coworkers in a rented apartment. The lights were off, and everyone took their seats. Mary stood next to Carson, who occasionally touched her arm. "Stop it. Everyone will notice," she whispered in Carson's ear, not wanting to ruin her husband's special evening. "I can't just stand here with you." Her lover smiled back. Finally, Hudson entered the apartment. The lights came on, and there was clapping and applause. Hudson wasn't sure if he was truly happy about the whole thing, but he forced a smile to avoid disappointing those around him. The last thing he wanted was to hurt the people he cared about. In the midst of the celebration, Carson approached Hudson. He was already very drunk and could hardly stand on his feet. All evening, Mary watched Carson carefully to make sure he didn't say anything inappropriate in front of her husband. Suddenly, however, Carson disappeared, and what she feared most happened. While drunk, Carson confessed to Hudson about their intimacy, even professing his love while exhaling the smell of alcohol on Hudson. Hudson looked at the drunken Carson with an indifferent expression and walked to the window, where he noticed his pack of cigarettes still lying on the window. The devoted husband felt a mixture of disgust, pain, and anger. With an animalistic grin, he bounced on Carson, beating him savagely until they were separated. The onlookers stared in bewilderment, waiting for an explanation from at least one of the men. It wasn't until they saw Mary, who was supposed to be by her husband's side but was instead sitting with Carson and sobbing, that guests began to understand. Friends who were familiar with Hudson's past and the story of his runaway bride were particularly shocked by what had just transpired. As for Hudson, he felt more devastated than ever before. He decided to file for divorce, as he could no longer stand being in the same space as Mary. On Monday morning, he prevented his unfaithful wife from returning to their home, leaving her belongings outside in shopping bags. Deep down, he knew it was wrong, especially since they had a child together and would eventually have to explain everything. However, he couldn't bring himself to live on the same property as Mary. The mere thought of it made him nauseous. Even before the divorce was official, Mary had already moved in with her lover. She tried to persuade their son to go with her, but surprisingly, he showed unprecedented resilience and preferred to stay with his father, for which Hudson was immensely grateful. Facing another betrayal alone would have been too much for him. His son's unwavering support prevented him from losing hope. The first quarrel between Mary and her lover occurred after only a month of living together. It was then that Mary realized why he had never been married. In the midst of a heated argument, he turned into a true tyrant, resorting to threats and even physical violence in an attempt to gain the upper hand. Mary became frightened, realizing it had all been a terrible mistake, but it was too late. She had no way of going back to her once beloved husband. Mary had to confront the looming problem on her own, while trying to maintain her sanity.